If you stand in the silent desert of New Mexico at exactly 3:17 a.m., locals say you can still hear it. The metallic hum, as if the sky remembers the secret the government swore it never had. The sound doesn't belong to wind, nor to any living thing. It vibrates through the sand, through the bones of the mountains, through the forgotten burial trenches carved during the summer of 1947, the summer America first learned the word cover-up. In July of that year, the desert was unbearably hot, even by New Mexico standards. Yet in the town of Roswell, a strange chill seemed to spread after the night of the storm. The lightning that evening had not cracked like nature. It pulsed in geometric flashes, thick and mechanical. Farmers across Chaves County watched the sky turn from white to emerald, then violet, then a burning cobalt blue no storm had any right to produce. Major Jesse Marcel had been asleep when the call came through to the Roswell Army Airfield. It was 2:14 a.m. when the phone rang, slicing through the humidity of his bedroom. He answered half awake, but the words snapped him into alertness instantly. "Major, something has crashed north of the Foster Ranch. The debris is unusual." Unusual was not a word ever spoken casually on military lines in 1947. The country was still adjusting to the tremors left by the Second World War. The Cold War was in its infant heartbeat. Surveillance, fear, espionage, those were the new normal. But unusual was not code used for Soviet metal scraps or a downed spy balloon. It meant something indescribable, something that did not fit the language America had at the time. Marcel dressed before the sun rose, arriving at the crash site by 5:12 a.m. His boots clawed through dirt and broken sagebrush until his flashlight beam caught the first glimmer of it. It didn't look like aircraft wreckage. It didn't look like machinery. The sand was littered with fragments of a silver alloy thinner than paper, yet stronger than steel. When he bent to lift one, it flexed like silk and then bounced back into form, completely unwrinkled, unbent, unscarred. He had seen German engineering, Japanese steelwork, secret Allied prototypes, but never anything that behaved like intelligent metal. What unsettled him most, however, was not the material. It was the symbols, etched seamlessly into the surface, glowing faintly like bioluminescent coral. These markings were not in Cyrillic, not in Morse, not in anything resembling Earth. Small, precise, mathematical, almost musical. He crouched lower. The wind was dead, breathless, as though the land itself held still. Behind him, Rancher Mac Brazel waited with the kind of fear only men who live with nature understand. Brazel had handled rattlesnakes, drought, and the violent unpredictability of western storms. Yet whatever lay across his land today had driven him pale and wordless. "It felt like nothing I ever seen," Brazel finally muttered. "Didn't burn, didn't smoke, just broke apart without really breaking." Marcel didn't respond. His radio crackled before he could form words. Retrieve. Secure. Silence protocol. No greeting. No identification. Just commands. By noon, dozens of military trucks arrived. Men unloaded heavy crates, lead containers, and canvas sheets. Civilians were pushed back, cameras confiscated. And for every scrap of metal collected, soldiers were instructed to walk in precise grid lines, sweeping the soil with magnetic instruments no journalist in 1947 knew existed. Later that same day, the Roswell Daily Record printed the words still recited in American myth. RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Wherever the truth began, the nation saw those 7 words, and just as quickly, they were erased from history by the very institution that printed them. The retraction came within hours. Weather balloon, nothing more. But in that window between announcement and denial, something had already moved, physically and politically. Because that night, the crash site was not the only disturbance in New Mexico. 2 hours away, near the unmarked military testing ground at White Sands, A recovery team uncovered what remained of a compartment separate from the main debris field. Unlike the Foster Ranch site, this craft segment was intact, unbroken, smooth as poured mercury. The desert was so silent the soldiers could hear their own blood between their ears. Lieutenant Harper approached, hand trembling as he extended his gloved fingertips to the pod-like structure. The moment skin met surface, the metal changed temperature instantly, cold to hot to cold again, responding almost intelligently, like a heartbeat trying to mimic his own. No one breathed. Then, without warning, the surface split. Not violently, not loudly, more like a pupil dilating. Inside lay a harness. Not shaped for a human spine or human limbs, but something longer, narrower, built with joints in places our bones do not bend. The air around it smelled faintly of ozone, cloves, and soil after rain. Before documentation could begin, before any scientific measurement could be taken, the order arrived. Transport to Wright Field. Top clearance. No public record. If questioned, experimental craft test. Weather equipment malfunction. Witnesses silenced. But witnesses are not so easily erased. Especially those who heard what came next. Because as the pod powered down, yes, powered, its final pulse transmitted through every compass in a 30-mile radius. Needles spun north to south to nowhere. Car engines died without reason. Livestock froze, eyes wide as if recognizing an ancient signal no living creature alive in 1947 should know. Marcel, in his transport jeep, felt it beneath his ribs. A frequency, not heard, but absorbed. Like something communicating without language. Like something not crashing, but arriving. Marcel did not sleep for the next 41 hours, not because of orders, but because the metal refused to leave his thoughts. On the convoy drive back toward Roswell airfield, he sat beside one of the sealed crates. Even locked inside, even wrapped in canvas and steel, it vibrated. No sound, just a frequency, a feeling. It throbbed behind the eyes, low and rhythmic, like the pulse of something alive contained where it did not belong. By the time the convoy reached the base hangar, an unfamiliar group of officials had arrived. Men in black, without insignia, without rank badges, without introductions. Their suits were too clean for desert travel, too pressed for emergency response. They moved with precision, not urgency, observing, not reacting. One of them, tall, with sharp, glacier blue eyes, stepped forward the moment the first crate hit the hangar floor. Major Marcel, he pronounced the name as if it were a classification rather than a greeting. You are to submit all written notes and cease verbal discussion of this event immediately. Marcel stiffened. Under whose authority? The man didn't blink. Executive. There is no higher. It was not a military answer, not even a political one. It was something colder. Behind the agents, General Ramey appeared,
face pale, jaw tight. "Major, you will comply." But Marcel saw something in his commander's eyes not typical of command. Not anger, not frustration. Fear. The kind of fear known only by men aware they had lost control of their own world. 2 hours later, parts of the wreckage were flown out under tarps on board an unmarked aircraft. The rest, including the intact pod and the alloy with the glowing hieroglyphic-like etchings, were loaded into a separate transport and rerouted not to Wright Field, as radioed earlier, but to Los Alamos. That name in 1947 meant only one thing: the birthplace of weapons that rewrote civilization. Yet what arrived there that summer was not weaponry. It was a question. By the third night after the crash, the desert storms returned, though the forecast predicted nothing. They erupted from clear sky, like the atmosphere itself reacted to the foreign metal torn from it. Bolts of lightning didn't fall from cloud to earth. They spread horizontally, streaking like neural synapses across a brain too large to comprehend. Cars stalled across Chaves County once more. Electricity flickered in homes. In the dark, radios crackled with transmissions in no human language. People thought it was static until the cadence repeated, symmetrical, coded, patterned. Those who heard it first never forgot it. Those who reported it disappeared from public record. At 3:50 a.m., a janitor working night shift in Hangar 84 dropped his bucket in terror when he walked past the sealed examination room. The light beneath the door flickered, not the yellow fluorescent of standard military bulbs, but a sharp white-violet glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. He froze. The hum he'd overheard earlier, he thought it was generator failure, was now unexplainably something else. He pressed his ear to the metal door. The room was supposed to contain only the debris, no engines, no reactors, nothing capable of movement. Yet
Yet he could hear shifting, a glide, like something reassembling. He backed away, breath shallow. His foot kicked the bucket. The crash echoed. Silence collapsed over the corridor. Then, 3 knocks from the other side of the door. Not frantic, not violent. Measured, intelligent. He felt the hair on his arms rise. The door remained locked, the corridor empty, but the message was clear. Whatever had crashed was no longer inert. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Washington, President Truman received a document stamped with a classification Americans wouldn't hear publicly for decades. Majestic 12 Preliminary Briefing, Level Omega Authorization. 12 names at the bottom, all men who understood what nuclear fire could do to nations, but none of whom were prepared for what questioned the sky that summer. General Hillenkoetter's notes were brief, stripped of embellishment. Non-terrestrial craft. Material self-reactive. Symbols non-human. Biological presence uncertain. Containment unstable. Truman reread the final line. Intelligence cannot be ruled out. He closed the folder, locked it, and issued the only command a president could when he realized Earth might no longer be a singular civilization. Everything is to be denied. Permanently. But denial does not erase memory. It does not silence those who witness. And it certainly does not stop the desert from remembering. Because at 4:17 a.m. local time, rancher Ethel Wilcox woke to a sound that rattled her windows, a hum so deep her bones shook against her mattress. She rushed outside expecting jets or thunder. There was neither. The stars above her, however, wavered, not like reflections in water, but like glass bending under heat. Then, without sound or trail or explosion, 3 pinpoints of light broke from the sky and hovered, not far, not high, just above the horizon.
unmoving, triangular, silent. Her dog whimpered and hid under the porch. The lights remained for 9 full seconds, then vanished, collapsing inward rather than accelerating outward, like returning home, not fleeing. She reported it the next morning to the sheriff. By evening, 2 men in black knocked on her door with signatures she was not permitted to read and a warning she never repeated. She sold the ranch the next month, moved to Albuquerque, spoke of the desert only when drunk and only to her sister, who told no one until she was 86 and could no longer sleep without hearing that hum. Inside Los Alamos, behind layers of security thicker than any nuclear vault, the pod remained sealed. Technicians observed it through tempered glass, writing notes they no longer believed. Because over the course of 6 nights, the pod changed. Not shape, not size, condition. The once smooth metallic surface now bore hairline traces of pigmentation, like veins beneath skin. They pulsed faintly, not rhythmically like a heart, not mechanically like engine heat, but with intentional cadence, like communication waiting for response. Scientists debated theories, reverse engineering, unknown isotope behavior, interdimensional resonance, but every theory collapsed under the weight of one impossible reality. The object was not inactive material. It was dormant intelligence. And dormancy ends. Always. On the 7th day, sensors in the observation chamber detected emission, not light, not heat, sound, or rather, frequency beyond human auditory range. Yet the wall shook, the floor shuddered, and every light in the compound went out. Emergency power triggered, security protocols initiated, doors sealed, transmission scrambled. But before blackout consumed the facility, one observer, Dr. Elias Warren, managed to scribble a line in his personal notebook, a detail he would spend the rest of his life regretting he ever understood. It is not communicating with us. It is calling something else. The desert storms returned, stronger than before. The air tasted metallic. Birds fled north in formation, abandoning nesting without instinctual logic. Horses refused movement. Dogs whined. Children woke screaming from dreams of blue light falling like rain. Those dreams were reported in Roswell, Vaughn, Santa Rosa, Magdalena, towns that shared only dust, isolation, and that sky. And on radar systems across New Mexico, military technicians watched another anomaly descend toward Earth, not crashing, not entering in fire, but arriving like it knew its destination. Triangular, silent, slow, like pilgrimage. Above the first crash site, above the place where the metal lay buried before men in black seized every gram. Hovering. Waiting. The radio operator whispered, because there was nothing left in the human brain capable of shouting. They're back. But back implies they ever left. If you want, I will continue immediately with the next installment. The classified autopsy vault, the disappearance of Dr. Warren, the 1952 frequency event, the rewriting of Project Blue Book, and the final transmission recorded before the government sealed the truth under concrete and oath. When the triangular craft hovered over the Foster Ranch site, every instrument within a 50-mile radius collapsed into silence. Not malfunction, not interference, silence. Signals died not because frequency was blocked, but because physics itself seemed paused. Radar screens dimmed, watchtowers froze, and in the Roswell Army Airfield Command Center, seasoned men who survived the European front and Pacific Hell now watched helpless as something above them operated beyond every law they swore reality obeyed. General Ramey stared at the static grid, jaw clenched. "Are we under attack?" No one answered. Attack implied hostility. This was something else. Interpretation, retrieval, recognition. The craft did not shift or flicker or descend. It hovered in perfect stillness, as if measuring the ground below, the scar of its predecessor, the excavation, the theft. Then, slowly, deliberately, its underside lit with the same deep violet glow that Marcel had seen etched into the wreckage fragments, those tiny symbols, not written, but inlaid, living within the metal itself. Marcel, standing at the observation deck with binoculars, whispered the thought none of them dared voice aloud. "It's reading the land." A soldier beside him swallowed hard. "Reading what, sir?" "Where it lost something." The moment he said it, the violet light pulsed once. Then the craft disappeared. Not vanished, not sped away, just ceased. Space reclaimed it without sound, without gravity acknowledging a departure. The silence afterward was worse than the presence. 3 hours later, Los Alamos went dark again, not from power failure, not from storm disruption. Dark as if the facility itself refused to illuminate what it contained. Inside the secured sublevel where the pod lay, Dr. Elias Warren watched the internal sensors spike. The pod hadn't moved, its structure remained motionless, but its emissions registered readings beyond known radiation, magnetism, or plasma. Something was waking. The glass separating him from the pod began to sweat, not from heat, but from microscopic vibration. "You're not trying to break out, you're synchronizing." The word tasted wrong on his tongue because the truth ran deeper. It was not synchronizing with Earth systems. It was syncing with something above. The frequency drummed in his skull, not painful, but invasive, like a foreign memory trying to overwrite his own. He wrote in his log, "They're not communicating with us. They're communicating with themselves, across distance, across whatever boundary separates arrival from origin." Before he could close the notebook, alarm shrieked. A flicker, barely perceptible, passed through the pod's surface. The metallic veins beneath its shell surged with color. Not violet, not blue. Gold. Faint. Alive. Remembering. 17 miles east of Roswell, in a diner that served weak coffee and cheaper eggs, waitress Marla McKinnon stood over a jukebox that suddenly turned on by itself. The machine lit in electric white, though no power outage had touched the town. The song it played was not listed, not even music. Just a hum, she felt rather than heard. A hum like sky resonating. Every glass on every table shivered, though the floor did not. A man at the counter, a retired radio engineer, covered his ears not from volume, but from familiarity. "I've heard that tone. In the Air Force. Classified circuits. It's a recall signal." Marla frowned. "For what?" "Not what," she whispered, eyes trembling. "Who?"
Across the country in Washington, Truman sat with his appointed 12, not generals, not senators, architects of secrecy. The folder before them bore no title now, only an embossed seal Americans would not see for 70 years. The director of counterintelligence spoke first. We cannot contain the event if a retrieval occurs. Truman stared down at the black-inked summary. Craft 1, recovered. Craft 2, observed. Biological host, unknown. Signal, ongoing. Containment, unstable. Retrieval, he repeated, more to himself than to them. If they came for what we took. He didn't finish. Words for that scale of consequence did not exist. 2 nights later, Hangar 84's reinforced vault, where portions of the wreckage had been stored pending transfer, detected motion inside. No breach, no mechanical entry. Motion. Security rushed. Lights strobed. Cameras flickered. Inside, the alloy fragments, once scattered debris, had aligned into a shape on the concrete floor. Not restored, not recombined, aligned. Geometric, precise. The symbols on each fragment now glowed in synchronization, like stars charting constellations only their makers understood. "Stop!" Marcel shouted to the nearest guard as containment teams surged forward. "Don't touch it!" He stepped closer, stomach knotted. The geometry was not random. It was mapping. He knew then without hypothesis, without training, without reason. The pieces were showing coordinates, not of where they crashed, of where they belonged. Back in Los Alamos, Dr. Warren wasn't sleeping. He couldn't. The hum permeated dreams now, threading through every hour. The pod sat silent, yet the frequency climbed, rising not in volume, but in clarity. His nose bled in the elevator once without cause. His hearing rang at night. He no longer saw desert when he closed his eyes. He saw sky, but not Earth sky. Stars in formations humans had never charted. A cluster of 3, a ring of 5, a corridor of light in a blackness too deep to be space and too structured to be void. He realized, trembling, they do not travel between stars, they travel between signals. The craft that hovered had not come to invade, observe, destroy, or communicate. It had come to locate its other half. Not half, host. Because the pod did not behave like machinery. It behaved like something left behind, something alive enough to call home. When the retrieval began, no one outside the chain of denial knew. Towns slept. Radios went silent. Winds stopped. Animals hid. Above the ranch again, at precisely 3:17 a.m., 3 violet points appeared. Not descending, not rising. Waiting. Perfect stillness. Time did not pass normally then. Clocks recorded seconds, but people felt none. The desert's heartbeat slowed to the hum. And in Los Alamos, the pod split. Not cracked, not opened. Returned. Light escaped, but not blinding. Warm. Gold pulsing with memory. The security footage from that moment would later be erased from every archive. But a single frame survived in Warren's mind. The pod was not empty. Never had been. It held something curled, elongated, not cadaveric, not mechanical, but cocooned. As light touched it, the form within stirred, not waking, not breathing, but recognizing, reuniting. Because just as the craft in the sky waited, the pod answered. Not with motion, with frequency, That hum, no longer hum, became two tones layered, entwined, harmonic. The desert responded. The sky responded. Something beyond both responded. And Warren, shaking, wrote the last line he ever dared record. It did not crash. It was left here. And now they have found it. The night they retrieved the pod, Dr. Elias Warren did not go home. He was escorted, not arrested, not questioned, escorted. Two men in pressed black suits arrived at his observation wing without introduction, without insignia. He tried to gather his notebook, the one filled with frequency charts, sketches of symbols, his trembling realizations. One of the men placed a hand on it lightly. "No need," the man said. Not threatening, worse, certain. Warren saw in his eyes the truth scientists rarely face. Discovery does not belong to discoverers. He was guided down the corridor, past level Omega containment doors, past laboratories that didn't officially exist. When he asked where they were taking him, neither answered. There was no transport vehicle waiting. There was no briefing. There was simply a door at the end of a hallway he had passed 100 times. Only now, clearance granted, the biometric lock recognized his presence and hissed open. Inside, he expected interrogation. Instead, a room silent as vacuum. A window looking not outside, but down. A subchamber deeper than he knew Los Alamos was built to hold. And there, suspended by magnetic field and something uncomfortably resembling reverence, lay the pod, not broken, not dormant, not confused. Resolved. Its gold-lit veins pulsed, not with the frantic call of something abandoned, but with the rhythm of reunion. The frequency had changed, no longer searching, now sinking. Across from the window, 6 individuals sat at a circular table, not military, not intelligence, something above both. Their faces calm, their eyes sleepless. The eldest among them gestured, his voice soft and terrifying. "You've heard them now, Elias. You understand why containment is no longer our priority." Warren didn't answer. He stared at the pod as its inner cocoon stirred again, not violently, not fully, but like a child stretching within a womb of metal memory. The elder spoke once more. "Retrieval was never our concern. Exchange is." Warren's blood froze. Exchange what? He wasn't answered. Some truths are not spoken. 2 states away at the Alamogordo airfield, radar arrays lit like fireworks. Not blips, not weather, formation. 3 craft, triangular, silent, descending with intent. Soldiers scrambled for intercept orders that never came, radios static, command lines wiped clean. The radar captain whispered to no one, "They're not invading, they're escorting." He was right, because above Los Alamos, joining the silent descent, came the same trio, violet lit, patient waiting not for confrontation, but for completion. What the U.S. government called a crash, they called separation. What officials studied as wreckage was not wreckage at all. It was incubation. A deliberate leaving. A child in a crib left on another world, waiting for retrieval or maturation. At precisely 4:03 a.m., the pod released its first true exhale. Not air, not gas. Light. Gold unfurled through the chamber in ripples, phasing through glass, through steel, through lead shielding and military doctrine. Alarms triggered, not from danger, but from recognition. The hum became language, not translatable, not earth-made, but a sequence Warren now understood without comprehension. Not words, return. Not dominance, reunion. The suits behind him spoke in hushed agreement. their fear replaced by inevitability. The cocoon opened, and what emerged was neither alien grotesque nor mechanical construct. It was elegant, a form shaped by evolution, not competing with nature, but complementing geometry. Limbs elongated, not insect-like, but graceful, jointed in ways suggesting motion beyond bipedal understanding. Eyes, if eyes they were, glowed with the same script-etched light Marcel once saw on the debris, as if symbols and souls shared architecture. It did not look at Warren, it looked upward, through steel, through mountain, through sky, toward the three waiting shapes. Warren's knees weakened, not from terror, but from recognition he could not rationalize. It was homesick. In Roswell, farmer Edith Wilcox, now living miles away, awoke again to the hum she'd fled. She sat upright in the darkness of her small Albuquerque apartment, heart pounding. For the first time in years, she didn't feel dread. She felt relief, as if whatever haunted the desert all that time had finally found what it came back for. The craft outside Los Alamos descended, not landing, not docking, aligning. The air did not shake, the ground did not quake. Gravity simply bent, quietly, respectfully. Inside, the golden-lit being raised a slender hand, not salute, not plea, recognition. The pod behind it dissolved, its alloy threads rising into particulate shimmer, rejoining its living sum. It had not been a vehicle. It had been an umbilical, a protective cradle, a signal that Earth, by accident or design, inherited. Warren felt something press behind his thoughts, not command, not invasion, not spoken language, memory, not his, theirs. A history stretching back before Earth named stars, before humans charted heavens, before language demanded vowels. Their travel was not conquest, it was succession. One mission leaves, another returns. Not across distance, but time. Later, official records would cite weather anomalies, balloon experiments, radar malfunction. Witnesses pressured, silenced, relocated. Dr. Warren's disappearance filed under mental fatigue and voluntary resignation. Marcel retired without ever recounting what he saw beyond base-approved phrasing. Archives sealed. Photos burned. Audio erased. But New Mexico remembers. Not in data, in sound. A hum in the sand. A frequency in the night wind. A pulse felt by those who stand on the Foster Ranch at 3:17 a.m. when stars shift ever so slightly out of human-known alignment. What crashed was never broken. What the government seized was never secret. What came back was never invasion. Only retrieval. And somewhere beneath the white sun of a new morning, the desert waits again, quiet, ancient, knowing. They will return not when called, but when time asks. The summer of 1952 arrived with a heat Washington had never known. Humid, dense, electric. Reporters blamed climate, senators blamed the power grid, scientists blamed cyclical jet stream shifts, but those who had stood in the New Mexico desert 5 years earlier recognized the sensation instantly. The frequency had returned. It began on a Saturday, July 19th, when radar technicians at Washington National Airport registered targets moving at impossible speeds. Not aircraft, not storm debris. Objects accelerating from 0 to 7,000 miles per hour, then stopping dead over the Capitol dome, without inertia, without sonic boom, without gravity acknowledging movement. Technician Edward Nugent stared at the blips. "No plane does that," he muttered. His supervisor leaned in, voice dry. "No plane we built." The radar room grew silent. Men who survived Europe now watched the sky as if it had memory. Above the city, just past midnight, pilots saw what radar confirmed. Lights.
Not beams, not lantern glow, sharp discs, brilliant white with edges of violet, arranged in patterns never used by military or commercial craft. 5, then 7, then 12, hovering, not circling, studying, waiting. In the Pentagon war room, phones rang with presidential urgency. Scramble jets, an aide barked. They did. F-94s roared upward, slicing through humid night air. Their pilots expected pursuit, dogfight, intercept. But when they reached the blips, the sky was empty. Then full. The discs reappeared behind them, above them, beside them, not attacking, not evading, observing, matching speed with eerie calm. One pilot, Lieutenant Wright-Patterson, found himself surrounded by 4 glowing orbs. He radioed in, a voice nearly breaking. "They're all around me. What should I do?" Ground command never answered, because there is no military directive for encountering something that recognizes you but does not threaten you. The orbs drifted past Patterson, unhurried, uninterested in conflict, as if to them jets were dragonflies, present, fast, insignificant. Sunday morning, headlines exploded. Mystery lights stun Capitol. Officials deny invasion theory. Radar confirms phenomena. The public, still haunted by whispers of Roswell, demanded truth. Senators wanted explanation. Generals craved containment. But the 12, the same 12 who sat with Truman in 1947, met again in a quiet, secure room beneath Arlington. Eisenhower listened without blinking. General Sanford, face drawn from sleepless nights, delivered the only statement intelligence would permit. There is no cause for alarm. It was a lie spoken for the good of the nation. Not because the lights posed danger, but because admitting their purpose would break the spine of human belief. By late July, the lights returned. Radar towers up and down the East Coast logged identical formations, fixed, intelligent, geometric. New Mexico hummed again. In Los Alamos, Dr. Warren, no longer Dr. Warren, just Elias, detained without sentence or trial. They didn't jail him, they kept him, not for safety, but because he understood. He heard the hum even through concrete and desert miles. Frequency, clear now, no longer calling retrieval, calling acknowledgement. He wrote on his final sheet of paper, "They are not showing presence, they are showing patience."
That same night, near Roswell, a boy named Colton Quinn woke to light on his bedroom ceiling, shifting, silent, triangular, violet. He walked barefoot onto the porch, drawn, unafraid. Dogs didn't bark, crickets didn't sing. The night was not night, but pause. One craft hovered low enough that its reflection lit his eyes gold. He felt not words, not command, remembering. From somewhere beyond stars, from the cradle left here, from the cocoon that woke. Colton whispered, though he didn't understand why, "I know you." The craft pulsed once. Not greeting, recognition. Then it rose, joined the others, and vanished without departure. In Washington, the official explanation rolled out with rehearsed simplicity. Temperature inversions, radar ghosts, false returns. America swallowed denial because truth required vocabulary the species did not have. But silence isn't forgetfulness. Desert winds still carry the hum. Animals still look upward on certain nights. And in abandoned stretches of New Mexico highway, if one stops at 3:17 a.m., when the stars bend ever so slightly out of their lattice, one might feel, not see, not hear, return. Because what crashed wasn't failure. What hovered wasn't invasion. What pulsed wasn't threat. It was time. Time reminding Earth that it is not alone and never was. The cocoon left here was not accident, it was embassy. Dormant intelligence entrusted like an infant left at a cathedral door, waiting for a world to mature enough to open it. And in 1952, they came not to reclaim, but to check, to measure, to see if the cradle had been treated with reverence or fear. Perhaps both. Humanity was weighed, not judged, not sentenced, simply considered. Then the sky closed, the hum quieted, but not gone, never gone. Only waiting for the moment when Earth finally looks up, not with fear of invasion, but with readiness for conversation. The year 1947, just months before the CIA officially came into existence, marked one of the most secretive agendas the U.S. military had ever drafted. The document, signed in a dim Pentagon meeting room, bore a single stamped phrase: Temporal Contingency, Operation Chronos. Nothing about that phrase made sense in 1947, because no one outside of a classified scientific circle believed time displacement could ever transcend theory. But the men signing it, President Truman included, had already seen something that convinced them otherwise. Something retrieved, something no American soldier was ever officially recorded as having found. The vault at Oak Ridge. Generals, scientists, mathematicians, and cryptologists gathered under the Tennessee facility. Colonel David Prentice, who had served in the Pacific Theater, arrived carrying a sealed steel case. No markings, no origin, only a burn so deep on the metal that its edges curled like blackened petals. "Are you sure this wasn't German?" asked Dr. Milton Hirsch, one of America's leading physicists. Prentice shook his head. "If it were German tech, I'd sleep better. We found this buried beneath volcanic glass. No ruins, no human remains, just fused earth and this object." He placed it on the table.
The moment it touched metal, every magnetic instrument in the room went dead. A pulse, silent, invisible, ripples through the fluorescent lights, causing them to flicker into a strange ultraviolet hue. Dr. Hirsch stepped back, whispering, "Volcanic glass doesn't melt to that state naturally. Not even an atomic blast does that." Prentice replied slowly, which means something hotter than an atomic blast struck that ground. He unlocked the case. Inside lay a sphere no larger than a baseball, dark, smooth, and impossibly perfect. But it wasn't the sphere itself that made Truman authorize Operation Chronos. It was what was engraved around its equator. A map of North America, not as the U.S. knew it, but as it would be by the year 2078. Borders different, states missing, entire coastlines redrawn. "How could anyone?" Dr. Hirsch muttered. "It is not made," interrupted another voice behind them. "It is returned." All turned to see the project's newly arrived scientific advisor, J. Robert Oppenheimer. The father of the atomic bomb had not been scheduled to appear. His presence alone confirmed the gravity. Oppenheimer's warning. Oppenheimer touched the sphere with a gentleness that frightened even Prentice. "When we split the atom, we assumed we were tearing open the smallest door. But it turns out, gentlemen, we tore the wrong one." "What are you saying?" Truman asked. Oppenheimer sighed, then delivered words that every man in the room would later have nightmares about. "This object is not from our past. It is from a future that no longer exists. Silence swallowed the lab. Temporal displacement isn't travel. It is correction. Someone sent this back because the timeline they inhabited collapsed. Dr. Hirsch shook his head. We have no proof of... Oppenheimer placed a document on the table, stamped with British military insignia. It was dated 1898, a Victorian-era explorer's journal, and sketched inside was the same sphere Prentice had dug from volcanic glass. How could this exist in 1898? Truman asked. Oppenheimer replied, because whoever sent it made multiple attempts, likely over centuries. And we've only now managed to retrieve one attempt? No, Oppenheimer whispered. We are the first who understand what it is. The 1898 discovery. Inside the journal, written by Sir Henry Westcott, were lines that chilled every man reading. I witnessed the ground erupt with a skyless light. No sun, no flame, just annihilating illumination. All vegetation turned to glass. The glass found in 1947 was the same as described in 1898. 2 different centuries, one identical anomaly. But why send a map? Prentice asked. Not a map, Oppenheimer corrected. A warning. The marked year. Truman leaned over the sphere, eyes tracing its engravings, until he reached the marked date, July 29, 2078. Beside it, a symbol that no known culture ever used, 3 intersecting rings, each broken at a different point. Dr. Hirsch shook his head. I've seen that symbol before, not in any ancient archive, in projections, theoretical collapse models. It is the signature for temporal end-state failure. Human extinction, Truman whispered. Not just human, Oppenheimer replied. Time itself, cause and effect, memory, history. Everything collapses when a timeline has exceeded paradox saturation. And you're suggesting we are headed toward that? Oppenheimer nodded. Unless whoever sent the sphere ensured we receive it in time. Uncovering past reports. Prentice opened another classified file. Sir, we found something else, years before this. Roswell, 1947, the official weather balloon cover story. Truman stiffened. Yes, Oppenheimer murmured. That wasn't extraterrestrial in origin either. Truman turned to him sharply. Then what? Oppenheimer replied, temporal debris. A chain of warnings across ages. Over the next weeks, the Oak Ridge facility dug through centuries of unexplained artifacts, each one suddenly making sense. The Antikythera mechanism, 100 BCE. The Voynich manuscript, 15th century. The Mayan collapse, unexplained and abrupt. The Tunguska explosion, 1908, ground fused like glass. The Philadelphia experiment rumors, 1943. All now theorized to be cross-temporal interference. Not aliens, not myth. Remnants of future civilizations attempting course correction. What every culture called prophecy, omens, angels, demons, or sky fire were simply failed temporal messages. The countdown begins. Then, during a quiet midnight shift, the sphere activated. No light, no sound, just a projection of scrolling data across thin air. not written in symbols known to man, but in evolving forms that rewrote themselves faster than any mathematician could track. The AI they didn't know was an AI spoke. Temporal region, Earth prime, divergence threshold, imminent, singularity breach, 37 years. 37 years until what? Hirsch demanded. The answer printed itself. Until causality ends. There was no apocalypse scenario described. No meteor, no war, just the end of before and after. Truman exhaled slowly, the weight of human history pressing onto his shoulders. Gentlemen, we are responsible not only for our future, but for the future that has already failed. Oppenheimer closed his eyes. I once quoted scripture after the bomb. Now I realize I was wrong about which line mattered. Not, I am become death, he whispered. There is a time to break and a time to mend. Final chapter. Temporal convergence. In 1977, Dr. Elias Warren sat alone in the Oak Ridge subvault, his papers and samples removed from all official archives. Other scientists were gone. He was alone. Suddenly, a faint vibration rang through the vault. The pod, which had remained inert and hidden before humanity, lit up again. This time, not just gold, but a mix of blue, violet, and iridescent light pulsed across it. A frequency began to radiate. It was not merely heard, it was felt inside the mind.
"They are not coming. They are calling," Warren whispered. The frequency penetrated his thoughts. An unknown language, yet he instinctively understood his information. Not conventional sound or signal. A message sent across time. The messages from 1947, 1952, and 1977 were now converging. A holographic projection appeared in midair, displaying recent history rewritten, events humans never officially knew. Roswell crash, 1952 mass radar sightings, Blue Book cover-ups, warning from the future, the 2078 timeline collapse. The senders, temporal intelligence, a species entity monitoring human time without humanity's knowledge. Warren wrote, "They are not alien. They are caretakers. Not invaders, but archivists. They correct divergence to prevent total causality collapse." The first coordinates align. The projection showed that the pod's events, 1947, 1952, 1977, were connecting past and future. Every Roswell crash, UFO sighting, or unexplained project was a step in a larger temporal mission. A table appeared. Year, event, purpose. 1898, volcanic glass anomaly, early warning. 1947, Roswell pod, first retrieval and observation. 1952, DC radar lights, confirmation and frequency test. 1977, Oak Ridge sphere, temporal convergence. 2078, future divergence, predicted causality collapse. Time was no longer a river, it was a complex network. The final message. The frequency now became a double-layered hum. One layer perceptible to humans, vibrations, faint lights. Another entering minds directly, transferring information. The message was simple. You are the keepers now. Observation, not interference. Failure to heed will collapse not only you, but all bound by time. Cradle returned. Watch, wait, learn. Warren understood. The cocoon from 1947 was not merely a pod. It was a temporal and informational architecture. Desert hum. Last scene.
Final night. Foster Ranch, Roswell. A boy, Colton Quinn's grandson, stood awake at 3:17 a.m. The ground pulsed lightly. The air was silent. No wind, no storm, no lights. Only the familiar hum. He understood. The pod was gone, but its influence, message, and history remained. The subtle pulse spread. In his mind, a final message. We return when you are ready, not before. Eyes closed, the pulse faded. But the frequency, the hum, and the message never truly end. Throughout human history, they watch, they wait, they learn. And Earth will one day realize that Roswell was never just an ordinary event.